Theo Clark stepped out of the glass tower that bore his name, the late afternoon sun bouncing off the steel corners like a spotlight chasing a man who no longer cared to be seen. He tugged at his cufflinks, nodding briefly to the doorman who greeted him like royalty. Drivers opened doors. Assistants buzzed in his earpiece. Somewhere in his inbox, 3 countries were waiting on his next move. And none of it mattered. Not the billion-dollar company. Not the penthouse that overlooked half of Manhattan. Not the string of gala invitations or boardroom victories. Success had become noise. His silence stretched louder. The elevator had barely reached the underground garage when his phone lit up again. Meeting at 4. Investors expect clarity on Tokyo expansion. He tossed the phone on the passenger seat of his Bentley without responding. Let them wait. He turned the engine and started driving without a destination. Just roads. Just the city. Just motion. His fingers tapped the steering wheel as classical music played faintly through the speakers. He used to love this song. Now, it felt like background noise to a life that had become too polished, too managed, too far from the streets that once smelled like bike tires, chalk drawings, and sun-drenched summer freedom. He passed through a neighborhood he hadn't seen in decades. The buildings had changed. The corner store had become a vegan bakery. But the park, that park, was still there. And just as he started to speed up, he hit the brakes. Not because of traffic, not because of a red light, but because his entire world shifted with one glance. A lemonade stand, a woman in a sundress, a face that lived only in his memories. He pulled over, heartbeat thick in his throat. He hadn't seen her in 27 years. Not since she disappeared without a word. Not since her parents moved out of state overnight and took her name, her laughter, her everything with them. But there she was, Amira. Theo didn't realize he'd parked until the door shut behind him. The city buzzed around him, joggers, strollers, a couple laughing over iced coffee, but it all faded beneath the rush of blood in his ears. His shoes crunched the gravel path as he walked slowly toward the corner of the park, each step heavier than the last. She hadn't seen him yet. Amira stood behind a folding table, her curls tied back in a red scarf, pouring lemonade from a plastic pitcher into paper cups. The sunlight caught the gold hoop earrings brushing her jaw, the kind she used to wear as a girl, the kind he once teased her about when they were 12 and inseparable. She was older now, fuller, stronger. Her body moved like it belonged to someone who'd carried weight, emotional and physical, and never let it break her. Her arms flexed as she worked, setting down cups, taking cash, nodding to customers with the same warm smile that once made his stomach flip during science class. But there was something else in her expression now, something quieter, weathered. Not defeat, determination. She wore a sundress that hugged her curves like it belonged to her and no one else. There was a chalkboard sign that read, "Fresh lemonade, $2, sweetened with real struggle," and below it, Amira's place scribbled with a heart. He almost laughed. That was exactly her, bold, unfiltered, and soft beneath her wit. She reached for another pitcher when their eyes met. The world around them stopped moving. Her hand froze mid-pour, lemonade nearly spilling over the rim. She blinked hard. The wind lifted her scarf just slightly, the way it used to when she'd race him down Jefferson Street on their bikes. Theo stepped closer. She didn't say a word. Neither did he. But the weight of 27 years pressed against the sidewalk between them. And then, "Theo?" Her voice cracked through the stillness like a thread pulled tight. One word, and it nearly brought him to his knees. He hadn't heard his name like that in decades. Not in boardrooms or interviews. Not in billion-dollar buyouts. But the way she said it, soft, questioning, with disbelief swimming just beneath the surface, cut through him sharper than any headline ever had. Theo tried to speak, but nothing came out. His throat locked. His heart thudded against his ribs, loud and erratic. It was like standing in a memory he hadn't dared to believe he'd ever relive. And suddenly, he was no longer the CEO with a private elevator. He was just the boy who once scraped his knees chasing her through alleyways, shouting her name like it was a promise. She stepped from behind the table slowly, her fingers still sticky with sugar and lemon. Her eyes, those rich almond-shaped eyes, scanned his face like she didn't trust what they were seeing. "You remember," he finally said, voice low, steadying himself. "I could never forget," she whispered. The words struck deeper than she could have known, because for years he thought maybe she had forgotten. That time and distance had dulled whatever fire had burned between them as kids. But now, standing this close, he saw the flicker still lived behind her eyes. They stood there, silence thick between them. People passed by, but Theo couldn't hear them. Couldn't see anything else but her. The same laugh lines, now deeper. The same eyes, now layered with life. The same woman, but more. He wanted to reach out, to touch her shoulder, to confirm she was real. But something in her posture stopped him. Not fear, not rejection. Caution. She crossed her arms, her lips pressing into a line. "What are you doing here, Theo?" He almost laughed. "I could ask you the same. I live here now," she replied, eyes narrowing slightly. "I run that cafe behind me." He turned his head slightly. That's when he noticed it. Amira's place written above the little corner shop. Windows fogged from kitchen heat. A chalkboard menu listing lemon tarts, cinnamon rolls, and soup of the day. "You own that?" he asked. She nodded. "Built it from scratch, just like you did with your empire, right?" That word, empire, it landed differently now. Before he could answer, movement in the cafe doorway caught his eye. A little boy stood there, barefoot on the worn wooden threshold. He wore a t-shirt 2 sizes too big, with a lemon printed on the front and denim shorts clinging to skinny legs. His hair curled tight against his scalp, coils Theo could have sworn he'd seen before, and his skin was a warm bronze that told a story all its own. But it was the eyes, those eyes. Theo felt the air abandon his lungs. Wide, golden brown, intense, like his own reflection staring back at him, only smaller and with a boyish innocence that hadn't yet been touched by the weight of expectations. The child clutched a red toy car, wheels spinning between small fingers as he looked curiously between his mother and the stranger standing a few feet away. He didn't seem scared, just watchful. Theo's mouth parted, but no words formed. His heart thudded once, then again, harder, louder, as realization slid in like ice water down his spine. Amira turned slowly, noticing his gaze. Her shoulders stiffened. "His name is Quentin," she said before he could ask. Theo's lips trembled around the question. "Is he?" She didn't answer right away, just looked at her son, then back at Theo, with a resignation that held both apology and defiance. "Yes," she said softly. "He's yours." Time fractured around him. He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All the years that had passed, every boardroom decision, every late night alone, every champagne toast that left him hollow, suddenly meant nothing. He had a son who didn't know his name, a son who had his eyes, a son who had spent 5 years in the same city while Theo scrolled headlines and contracts, blind to the one story that should have mattered most. Theo looked at Amira again. Her chin was lifted, steady. She wasn't begging. She wasn't apologizing. She was protecting. And that, more than anything, told him she hadn't told him out of spite. She had told him because the moment demanded truth. Theo's jaw tightened. He forced himself to breathe, to speak, to anchor his voice before it cracked wide open. "You should have told me." Amira didn't flinch. "You think I didn't want to? Then why didn't you?" "Because when I found out I was pregnant, you were already long gone. I tried to look you up, but you were already at some Ivy League school, living a life so far removed from mine it might as well have been another planet." "I would have come back," he said quietly. "I would have. You were 18, headed for greatness, and I was working double shifts at a diner, trying to afford prenatal vitamins." Theo ran a hand down his face. "You didn't even give me the choice." "No, Theo. I gave myself the choice to survive. I did what I had to do, for me and for him." There was no bitterness in her tone, no raised voice, just a calm, firm resolve, the voice of a woman who'd made peace with her choices, even when they hurt. He glanced at Quentin again. The boy had gone back inside, uninterested in the drama outside. A child with no idea that the man standing across from his mother was his biological father. Theo swallowed. "Is he okay? I mean, does he have what he needs?" "He has what matters. He's loved, he's safe, he's kind, and he's smart, too smart." Theo nodded, blinking away something he didn't want her to see. "Does he know about me?" She shook her head. "I told him his father wasn't in the picture. I didn't know what to say, not until I knew if you'd even want to be." "I do." The words tumbled out before he could catch them. Her eyes flicked up to his, searching, guarded. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "I'm not chasing some fairy tale reunion. I've worked hard to build a life that's real, one that doesn't depend on anyone showing up with a checkbook or an apology." Theo stepped back slightly, understanding the message loud and clear. She wasn't looking for rescue. She was looking for respect. And now that he was here, truly here, he had to decide if he had the strength to earn it. Theo didn't push. He didn't follow her back behind the lemonade stand. He didn't ask more questions or press for forgiveness he hadn't earned. He just turned, walked across the path, and sat on the nearest bench. From there, he watched her work. She served customers with a rhythm born from muscle memory. Pour, smile, collect, thank. Every now and then, she'd glance his way, her expression unreadable. Not cold, just unreadable. Like she hadn't decided what he meant to her anymore, and he didn't blame her. Theo leaned forward, elbows on knees, fingers laced tightly together. His pulse still hadn't settled. The weight of what just happened sat heavy in his chest. A son. Not a theory, not a what-if. A child with his eyes and her strength. A child who lived just a few city blocks from his penthouse while he had spent nights convincing himself that he'd made peace with never having a family. He thought of all the nights he lay awake in hotel rooms, wondering why the success tasted so bitter. Wondering why no woman ever stayed long enough to become more than an accessory at gala events. And now the answer was clear. He'd already given his heart away. It just took 27 years to find out where it went. Amira's laughter floated across the space as she talked to an older woman buying 3 cups. It was soft, unguarded, for that one moment at least. The kind of sound that once made a younger Theo forget how to breathe. She wiped sweat from her brow with the back of her arm and poured another cup. She was a woman holding it all together. Raising a child, running a cafe, making lemonade on a summer day while the man who once promised her forever sat across the sidewalk, 30 pounds heavier with regret and 2 decades too late. Theo pulled out his wallet, staring at it like it might hold the words he couldn't say. He didn't want to buy her time or forgiveness. He just needed a moment. Theo stood slowly, brushing invisible dust from his slacks like he was trying to steady himself. His footsteps felt heavier now, deliberate, every movement underlined with history. He approached the stand again, waited his turn behind a teenage boy who paid in quarters and left with a satisfied grin. When he stepped forward, Amira didn't smile. She raised an eyebrow. "You thirsty?" she asked, arms folded, not touching the pitcher yet. "Parched," he said, voice even. She grabbed a paper cup, filled it halfway, then paused. "You want sweet or regular? Whichever one you'd make for yourself." That gave her the slightest pause. Her lips pressed together. She poured a full cup from the pitcher labeled "sweetened with struggle" and handed it to him. $2, she said. He slid a crisp $100 bill across the table. Amira stared at it for a second. "You always pay 50 times the price for lemonade, or is this some CEO guilt thing?" He shrugged. "You deserve more than I can pay. But this is a start." She didn't reach for the money. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on his. "I'm not for sale, Theo." "I know," he said quietly. "And neither is my son. I'm not trying to buy anything. I just want to stand here, drink something you made, and remember what it feels like to be near you without the world interrupting." She looked at him for a long beat, then picked up the bill, folded it once, and tucked it under the edge of the lemonade sign. "I'll put that toward fixing the cafe ceiling. Quentin thinks it drips because it's crying. I tell him it's sweating, just like the rest of us." Theo chuckled. "Sounds like he inherited your wit." She gave a small smile, barely there, but real. Theo took a sip. It was cold, tart, bold, honest, just like her. And for a moment, the space between them didn't feel like decades. It just felt like unfinished business. The sun dipped low over the city, throwing long shadows across the sidewalks and casting Amira's cafe in a soft, golden hush. The lemonade stand was gone. The chalkboard sign now leaned against the cafe door, and the steady hum of traffic had quieted to a lazy murmur. Theo returned just after 8. He didn't knock at first, just stood outside, staring at the window where warm light flickered behind drawn blinds. Inside, he could see her silhouette move past the counter, stacking chairs, wiping down surfaces, resetting for tomorrow. His hand hovered over the door handle for a full second before he opened it. The little bell above the door gave a half-hearted jingle. Amira turned sharply, startled. She wore a long t-shirt that fell just above her knees, her hair piled on top of her head, no makeup, no earrings. Just her. Beautiful. Bare. Real. She didn't speak. Neither did he. I figured you'd show up, she said finally, wiping her hands on a dish towel. You always had trouble walking away when something wasn't finished. Theo closed the door behind him. Some things aren't meant to be left unfinished. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You looking for closure? No, he said. I'm looking for honesty. Amira tilted her head. About what? About why it still feels like I'm 15 every time I look at you. A flicker crossed her face, surprise maybe, or recognition, but it disappeared quickly. I'm not that girl anymore, Theo. I've changed. So have I, he said. But you're still the only person who ever called me out when I thought I was untouchable. She smirked faintly. You're still cocky. You're still dangerous, he said. She narrowed her eyes. Don't do that. What? Come in here with your suit and your timing and act like this is easy, like you can just show up and flip the script. I'm not here to flip anything. I'm here to listen. If you'll let me. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the counter. And then, quietly, she said, Quentin's asleep upstairs. So if you're staying, keep your voice low. Theo nodded. She didn't smile, but she didn't stop him when he walked closer either. Theo took a slow seat at the counter, eyes roaming the small cafe that smelled faintly of lemon zest and vanilla. A single bulb flickered above the espresso machine. The place wasn't fancy. It was lived in. It was earned. He watched as Amira moved behind the counter, pouring 2 glasses of water without asking. No lemon, no sugar, just quiet understanding. She slid 1 glass to him and leaned on her elbows, watching him the way someone studies a storm on the horizon, not afraid, but prepared. So, she said. What now? Theo didn't have a polished answer. For once, he didn't want one. I don't know, he admitted. But I'm here. For now? He looked her square in the face. For as long as you'll let me be. She didn't nod, didn't speak, but she didn't send him away either. And sometimes, silence says more than words ever could. Hey you, watching this right now, have you ever had someone from your past suddenly reappear? Someone you thought you'd never see again? Someone who still made your heart skip even after years apart? Drop a comment below and tell us, would you let them back in? Or would you walk away to protect your peace? This story is just getting started, and it's short, straight, and full of meaning. If it's already pulling at your heart, hit that like button, drop a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Peterson Long Stories so you never miss these kinds of powerful, emotional narratives that leave you thinking long after the video ends. Amira didn't pour lemonade this time. She set the pitcher down with a soft thud, leaned her elbows on the counter, and locked eyes with Theo. Let's make something clear, she said, voice low but steady. I'm not some unfinished chapter you get to flip back to because you're curious or lonely. Theo didn't flinch. He took the words like he expected them, like he'd earned them. I'm not here to fix the past, he said quietly. I'm here because I couldn't walk away again. She shook her head slowly. You think $100 lemonade and a heavy stare is supposed to erase 5 years of raising a child alone? You think standing in my cafe makes you a father? No, he replied, but it makes me someone trying to figure out how to become one. Her expression didn't soften. I've done this by myself, Theo. The diapers, the fevers, the nights when I wasn't sure we'd eat the next week. I'm not some sad story you can write a check over. He leaned forward. I don't see you as a story. I see you as the woman I lost, and I'm not trying to buy anything, Amira, least of all your forgiveness. Her jaw clenched slightly. Good, because I don't hand that out like samples. He gave a tight nod. Understood. She studied him a second longer, like she was trying to see beneath the tailored suit and the carefully spoken tone. You're not the same kid I used to race bikes with. No, he agreed. But that kid never forgot you. Not once. Her eyes flickered, but she stood her ground. She didn't owe him kindness. She didn't owe him warmth. Not after what life had put her through, but she still hadn't asked him to leave. Theo set his glass down and rested his palms flat on the counter. I looked for you, he said. Amira raised a skeptical brow. You didn't look hard enough. I was 15 when you disappeared. One day you were there, the next, your house was empty. No goodbyes, no letters, just gone. She folded her arms again. We moved overnight. My father lost his job. My mom got a janitorial gig in another state. No time for proper goodbyes. I tried to find you, he continued. At first through school records, then later through social media, but you never posted anything, never left a trail. She smirked bitterly. I wasn't hiding. I just didn't have time for hashtags and filters when I was working 2 shifts and raising a toddler. Theo looked away for a second, swallowing his frustration. In college, I searched under your name, even hired a PI in my early 20s. But he came back with nothing. You were a ghost. Funny, she murmured. I've been very much alive. His jaw tightened. That's not what I meant. She sighed. Theo, you're used to getting what you want. I'm sure the search didn't feel urgent after a while. He met her eyes. It never stopped feeling urgent. I just got tired of dead ends. For the first time, her posture wavered. The fire in her eyes dimmed just slightly. You really looked for me? I thought maybe your parents sent you to live with an aunt, or maybe you moved across the country. Every time I made it to a new city for business, I found myself scanning crowds, checking coffee shop name tags. I didn't even know what I was hoping for. She didn't speak, just stared at the counter between them. I wasn't avoiding you, he said gently. But after a while, I convinced myself you were gone for good, that maybe you forgot. I never forgot, she whispered, more to herself than to him. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The low hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, mingling with the soft creak of wood as Amira shifted her weight and leaned back against the counter. Theo watched her closely, not the way a man stares at a woman, but the way someone stares at a chapter they never finished reading. You remember Jefferson Street? He asked finally, voice low. Her mouth twitched. Where you crashed your bike into the mailbox? He chuckled. I still have the scar. I told you not to race me downhill. You said, bet you can't beat me to the corner. You didn't have to take it so literally. I always took you literally, Amira. That was the problem. She smiled, reluctant but real. You were such a mess, skinny, loud, couldn't even hold a pencil right. Your mom said I had nervous hands. My mom liked you. She didn't like many people. She liked how you used to sneak me extra snacks from your lunchbox. Cheese crackers and those cinnamon sticks. Because you never brought anything but peanut butter sandwiches and attitude. She laughed softly. Still allergic to strawberries? Still pretending not to be, depending on the crowd. Amira reached for the water pitcher, poured herself a glass, and leaned against the sink. The tension between them didn't disappear. It shifted, softened, became something closer to recognition. You used to say you were going to marry me one day, she said suddenly. I was serious. I was 12. I was still serious. She took a sip, eyes never leaving his. He didn't look away either. The space between them had changed. No longer sharp, no longer full of accusations. Now it was full of history. And maybe, just maybe, a little possibility. Theo stood from the stool and walked toward the window. He looked out onto the quiet street, watching the last of the daylight fade behind the buildings. His voice came low, measured, but without the polished tone he used in interviews or investor calls. I've got everything, he began. The company, the cars, the ridiculous views from every floor of my penthouse. People call me a success. He paused, turned back toward her. But I built the wrong life, Amira. She didn't interrupt, didn't roll her eyes or challenge the statement. She just listened. I used to think climbing meant winning, that building something big meant I was doing it right. But every time I hit a new milestone, it felt emptier, louder but lonelier, and I couldn't figure out why. Theo stepped closer, until I saw you again. Her arms folded, but she didn't move away. He continued, You grounded me before I knew I needed grounding. You made me laugh without trying. You made me feel, back then, like I could be myself without impressing anyone. You were a good kid, she said softly. I was better around you, he said. That's the part I didn't understand until now. Her brows drew together, but her gaze didn't waver. You're not saying this because you saw your reflection in a little boy's eyes, are you? No, his voice was steady. I'm saying it because when I looked into yours, I remembered what home used to feel like. That hit her differently. She lowered her arms, tucked a stray curl behind her ear. Then, quietly, she asked, And what do you want now? He answered without hesitation, a chance to get it right. She held his stare, long and hard. No promises, no softening, but she didn't say no. Amira moved past him toward the small kitchen behind the counter. She grabbed a towel, wiped off a stack of plates, and didn't say a word for nearly a full minute. Theo stayed where he was, unsure if he was being dismissed or silently invited deeper. Eventually, she nodded toward the stool across from hers. Sit, if you're not in a rush. He sat, It wasn't a warm invitation. It wasn't a welcome home. It was space. Space he hadn't earned, but she was willing to let him occupy. She poured herself another glass of water and rested her elbows on the counter. This isn't some romantic movie, Theo. You don't walk in and undo years of silence with sweet words and deep stares. I know, he said simply. You don't get to claim a seat at my table because you decided now's the right time. I'm not claiming anything, he said. I'm asking. She nodded once. Good. She glanced around the cafe, the soft light illuminating the scratches on the wood, the slightly chipped paint on the far wall, the photos of Quentin taped near the espresso machine. I built this place with tips and burnt fingers, she said. Cried in that corner 3 different times trying to figure out how to pay rent. Slept here once when the lights were off in my apartment. Theo didn't interrupt. I tell you that so you understand what you're sitting in. This isn't just a cafe. It's my life. He nodded. Then I'll treat it like one. A beat passed. She reached behind her, grabbed a second glass and poured him a fresh cup of lemonade. No garnish, no ice. Just poured and slid across the counter. You're here, she said. That's enough for tonight. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't trust, but it was a beginning. Theo took the glass without speaking, letting the cool weight settle in his hand before lifting it to his lips. The lemonade was tangy, sharper than he remembered. Less sugar, more citrus. It stung slightly on the way down, but it was real. Unapologetic, just like her. Amira sipped from her own cup, eyes scanning the room like she was checking for invisible cracks. You made this yourself? He asked. She nodded. Always do. Still squeezed the lemons by hand. You could automate. I could, she said, but the flavor changes when you stop touching it. He looked at her for a long second. That's not just about lemonade, is it? She smirked, faint but clear. Now you're catching on. The quiet stretched between them again, comfortable this time. Theo leaned back slightly, one arm resting on the back of his chair. Amira had shed her earlier tension like a coat she wasn't ready to wear anymore. He glanced at the photo wall behind her. There were snapshots of Quentin, some with smudged fingerprints on the edges. Birthday cake, finger paints, snow days. A full childhood playing out in small, taped-up squares. You've done a good job with him, Theo said. Her eyes flicked to the photos, then back to him. I did what I had to do. I know it's late, but I want to know him. Her jaw tensed. One step at a time. He nodded. Fair. Their hands rested inches apart on the counter. She didn't move hers. Neither did he. I used to think about this, he said. Us, sitting somewhere like this, you pouring lemonade, me trying not to mess it up. You're doing a mediocre job, she replied, fighting a smile. I'll take that. A flicker passed between them, quick and warm. And for the first time all night, she didn't look like she was waiting for him to leave. She looked like she remembered too. The clock above the doorway ticked softly. Amira stood, stretching slightly as she reached for a clean rag and began wiping down the counter in slow, absent strokes. Theo watched the curve of her back, the line of her jaw, the way her body moved with quiet ownership of this space. He rose from his seat, walking around the edge of the counter, not too close, just enough to see her profile more clearly under the glow of the hanging bulb above. Do you remember the last thing I said to you? He asked. She paused, rag in hand. You told me you'd beat me in the next race. I lied. She turned her head slightly. No. You believed it. He smiled. I believed a lot of things back then. That we'd go to the same high school. That we'd never lose touch. That I'd marry you by 25. She didn't laugh, but her lips parted. I used to wait for you on my porch every evening, he said. Hoping you'd show up with that broken Walkman you loved. You'd play that same mixtape. And I'd act like I hated it. Amira's voice dropped low. You used to sit 3 inches closer every day. I wanted to sit closer tonight. She looked at him now, fully, and for the first time, she didn't stop him when he stepped forward. His hand rose, slow and deliberate, brushing a stray curl from her cheek. Her eyes didn't close, but they softened, something unspoken swirling in them. Fear, hope, memory. When he kissed her, it wasn't urgent. It was careful. Their lips met like a question, an ache held in silence too long. She tasted like lemons and late nights. His hand hovered at her waist, never pulling, just asking. Her fingers grazed his collarbone, and then rested flat against his chest. 1 beat, 2, then she pulled away, eyes wide, breath quick. That was a bad idea, she whispered. I disagree, he said quietly. She didn't move, and she didn't kiss him again. But she didn't walk away either. Amira didn't speak after the kiss. She walked over to the door, turned the sign to closed, and locked it without looking at him. Her back stayed to him for a long moment, her shoulders rising and falling with quiet breath. Theo waited, saying nothing. When she finally turned, her voice was calm, but not cold. You should go. It's late. He nodded. I understand. He stepped toward the door, stopping just beside her. She didn't look up. Thank you, he said, for not throwing me out the second you saw me. You're not a stranger, she said. No, he agreed, but I'm not family either. She hesitated, then opened the door for him. The city air hit him like a second reality. The night had cooled. Somewhere down the street, a train passed, its distant horn dragging through the quiet like a memory that wouldn't fade. Theo stepped out onto the sidewalk but turned back once more. If you ever want help with the ceiling, or just company, he said, you know where to find me. She didn't smile, but she didn't shut the door either. She stood there, watching as he walked away, her arms folded tight across her chest, heart beating loud behind a face she'd taught herself to keep still. Let's be real. If someone from your past showed up after years of silence, carrying both regret and sincerity, would you let them in? Drop a comment below and tell us, would you open the door like Amira did? Or would you close it and protect your peace? The cafe lights had been dimmed. The streets outside quieted to a hush, broken only by the soft hum of a distant engine or the faint scrape of wind against the windows. Theo stood just inside the doorway. Amira hadn't moved far from where she locked the door behind him. Neither of them said a word. Something in the air shifted, less tension, more gravity. They weren't looking for closure anymore. They weren't trying to solve the past. They were feeling it, living it. Her breath hitched the second he stepped forward. He didn't touch her at first, just stood in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body against hers. When he finally raised his hand, it went to her cheek. Slow, gentle, as if asking her permission with each inch of movement. She didn't stop him. Theo's fingers traced the side of her face, the curve of her jaw, down to her collarbone. Her skin responded, goosebumps rising, breath deepening. When he kissed her this time, it wasn't hesitant. It was heat. It was all the years they'd missed. All the things left unsaid. All the longing stored like kindling waiting for a spark. Amira's hands reached for his tie, yanked it loose with more force than necessary, her fingers finding the buttons of his shirt before he could say her name again. They moved together, urgently, messily, honestly. He lifted her up onto the counter like he already knew where she fit, like her body had always belonged there, waiting for this exact moment. Her dress bunched around her thighs. His lips moved down her neck. She gasped, then exhaled his name so softly it nearly broke him. Their bodies collided with a hunger that had nothing to do with lust and everything to do with recognition. She wasn't something to conquer. He wasn't someone to fix her. They were just two people who had been broken, finding rhythm in each other's cracks. And on that counter, beneath the low hum of a flickering bulb, the past didn't disappear. It was rewritten, one kiss, one touch, one breath at a time. Their bodies slowed before their breathing did. Theo's forehead rested gently against Amira's as they sat tangled on the counter, skin flushed, clothes halfway abandoned, limbs still trembling from the storm that had just passed. But there was no rush now, just the weight of silence settling over them like a blanket too familiar to be questioned. Her fingers slid down the side of his arm, pausing at a faded scar near his shoulder. Still have it, she murmured. He glanced down. Jefferson Street mailbox. I told you not to swerve last minute. You told me to stop showing off. She smiled. It faded quickly. Then, softly, why now? Theo raised his head slightly. Because seeing you again reminded me what I lost, what I gave up chasing something I thought mattered more. Her gaze lowered. And if I hadn't been behind that stand, if you hadn't driven by, I don't know, he said. Maybe I'd still be walking around convinced I was happy. Maybe I'd keep thinking I had time to figure it all out. He lifted her hand and pressed it to his chest. But this, it stopped time. She pulled her hand back, carefully. Don't say things you don't mean. I've never meant anything more. She looked at him, lips slightly parted. You disappeared from my life once, she said. I won't let you drift in and out of it again. I'm not drifting. I'm anchoring, he replied. Right here. The way he said it, low, not begging, not performing, made her chest tighten. But Amira had learned not to let words melt her. Don't think sleeping with me is a shortcut to something real. He met her eyes. It's not. It's the beginning of me showing up. She studied his face like it was a language she used to speak fluently but hadn't heard in years. And in that moment, she didn't answer with words. She leaned forward and kissed him again. Not with hunger, with memory, with weight, with hope she hadn't meant to give away, but couldn't hold back. They sat on the counter for a while, wrapped in the kind of silence that didn't need fixing. Just breathing, just being. Eventually, Amira reached for the hem of her dress, pulling it back down over her legs. She hopped off the counter and walked barefoot to the tiny fridge behind the counter. She grabbed 2 bottles of water, handed one to Theo, and leaned back against the sink. I didn't plan any of this, she said, unscrewing the cap. Neither did I, he replied, voice low. She took a sip, then stared at the floor as she spoke. When I found out I was pregnant, I was 19, working at a gas station in Indiana. No family around, no money, just me. And the sound of a test result that changed everything. Theo said nothing, just listened. I didn't cry, not right away. I just kept staring at that little line. I remember thinking, well, okay, guess this is the next chapter. Like I was reading someone else's life. She paused. Her voice didn't shake, but there was an ache buried under her words. I moved back here a year later. It was the only place that ever felt like mine. Got a job waiting tables at a diner. Worked nights, then weekends at a laundromat. Saved every tip until I could rent that cafe space. Her eyes lifted to meet his. I started with 2 recipes, lemonade and cinnamon rolls. Quentin used to sleep in a carrier behind the register. Customers thought it was cute. They didn't know I was surviving off the leftovers. Theo's jaw clenched. You did all that on your own? I had no choice, she said. No rich parents, no college degree, just stubbornness and fear. You didn't just survive, he said. You built something. She looked away. It's not much. It's everything, he replied. She didn't argue, because deep down, she knew he was right. Theo leaned back, one hand bracing the edge of the counter as his chest rose and fell slowly. You want to hear the other side? He asked. Amira folded her arms and nodded. I got into Dartmouth on a scholarship I didn't even apply for. My father submitted everything behind my back, said you're not wasting your potential chasing girls in summer jobs. She tilted her head. Was I the girl in that sentence? He nodded once. You were the only one that mattered. Amira said nothing. He continued. College was brutal. I wasn't the rich kid, I was the smart one with a chip on his shoulder. I wore suits to class because I thought if I looked the part, I'd be accepted. I faked my way through everything, friendships, internships, even relationships. I didn't have time to feel anything. Theo's voice dipped, more gravel than polish now. I started the company in a dorm room, scared, desperate, obsessed with proving I wasn't just another brown kid trying to survive capitalism. I wanted to own it. Amira leaned against the sink, watching him. I worked 20-hour days, slept under desks, built an empire one sleepless night at a time. But every milestone felt like a checkmark, not a celebration. His eyes met hers. The night we landed our first $1 million round, I opened a bottle of champagne alone in my apartment. No one to toast, no one to call, just silence, and a voice in my head saying, still not enough. Her face softened, just barely. I kept chasing, he added. The next big win, the next contract, the next headline. And I told myself it was worth it. Amira spoke quietly. Was it? Theo didn't blink. Not without you. Not without him. She looked away, unsure how to hold the weight of that answer. But she didn't deflect, didn't retreat. She simply whispered, at least now I know what you were building while I was building us. Amira didn't speak again right away. She reached behind her, turned off the last light above the counter, and let the cafe sink into a soft amber hue. The only glow came from the street lamp outside, filtering through the front windows and laying quiet patterns across the tiled floor. Theo stepped forward. He didn't rush her, didn't grab. He just opened his arms. She hesitated for half a breath, then moved into them. Her cheek pressed to his chest. His chin rested gently against the top of her head. Neither of them said a word. For the first time in years, Theo felt like the noise inside him had gone still. There were no deadlines, no flashing screens, No suits to impress or contracts to win. Just her heartbeat against his, and the faint scent of lemon still clinging to her skin. He ran his hand slowly up her spine, then down again, settling at the small of her back. Her fingers gripped the edge of his shirt like she needed the fabric to keep herself steady. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this again," she whispered. "Me either." They stood there for minutes, maybe more, not swaying, not rocking, just still. Holding didn't need rhythm when it was real. When her breathing finally slowed, and his hands stopped shaking, Amira pulled back just enough to look up at him. Her eyes weren't guarded this time. They weren't wide with fear or distant with doubt. They were full of memory, full of pain, full of a kind of knowing that only comes from surviving everything the world tried to break you with. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit of trust. Theo brushed his thumb along her jaw. She leaned into it, eyes closing again. For now, this was enough. No promises, no fantasy, just warmth where there used to be absence. Amira's forehead rested against Theo's chest again, just long enough to feel the even beat beneath her cheek. Then she pulled back, slowly, and stepped away. She walked to the counter, retrieved her glass of water, took a small sip, then looked at him over the rim. Theo stayed where he was, shirt half unbuttoned, tie lost somewhere near the espresso machine, eyes fixed on her like she was still unfolding in front of him. "You good?" she asked, tone almost teasing. He nodded. "Better than I've been in a long time." She smirked faintly. "That's a low bar." He smiled. "Fair." There was a long pause. Not tense, just quiet. Charged in the way only old lovers could be. Theo walked over to where she stood behind the counter. He reached for her hand again, more gently this time. Fingers brushing fingers. He lifted her palm, pressed it against his chest, right over the slow, steady thump. "You were always home," he said, voice barely more than breath. Amira looked up at him. Something shifted behind her eyes, something soft, something sharp. "You know what you taste like?" she asked, lips parted, breath still warm from their kiss. He blinked. "What?" She stepped closer, close enough that their hips touched through fabric, close enough that her voice lowered again. "Lemonade and heartbreak." Theo exhaled through his nose, hands still holding hers to his chest. "I can live with that." She tilted her head. "Don't romanticize it. That's not a compliment." "I didn't take it as one. Good. But it's true," he added. "Everything about you lingers." Her smile disappeared. "That's not always a good thing, Theo." He nodded. "No, but it means I never forgot." She didn't respond, just held his gaze, and even though the air between them was full of everything they hadn't said, it felt like they were finally starting to say it. Theo woke up with sunlight brushing against his face, and the scent of lemon still clinging faintly to his skin. He hadn't slept well, not because of regret, but because his mind wouldn't stop replaying her breath against his neck, her voice in the dark, her hesitation when he touched her. He sat up on the couch in his penthouse, bare chest exposed to the breeze coming through the open window. The city buzzed below, traffic, horns, early ambition. He reached for his phone, 17 notifications. None of them mattered, until he saw one. Subject, "We need to talk." Urgently. From Victoria Clark, his mother. He sighed, opened it. There was no greeting, no warmth, just a single line and an attachment. "You've made headlines. You know how dangerous this is. See below." Attached, a screenshot of an article from one of the country's largest business tabloids. Reclusive single mother linked to billionaire CEO. Eyes there a secret love child? Theo blinked. His heart didn't skip. It slammed. The article had a photo taken from across the street, him standing at Amira's lemonade stand, looking like a man who'd just seen a ghost. Another image, grainy but clear, of Quentin holding a cup of lemonade, the caption reading, "Too close to deny." He scrolled further. Anonymous quotes, speculation about paternity, references background, low income, unverified sources, child out of wedlock. To Amira's. It felt cold, ugly. He set the phone down slowly, chest burning. Knew exactly who leaked it, who started it, who wanted this narrative out before he could control it. His mother had always moved quickly when it came to optics. And now, just like all those years ago, she was moving to erase a problem before it got too real. But this time, He wasn't a child. This time, she wouldn't get the last word. By noon, the article wasn't just trending. It was everywhere. Theo's name was splashed across financial websites, gossip columns, and social media threads. Headlines ranged from billionaire caught up in secret paternity scandal to who is the woman that stole Theo Clark's heart and had his child. Some outlets focused on the romance. Most focused on the money. Speculation swirled around Quentin's identity, Amira's background, and whether Theo had knowingly abandoned his son, or worse, been kept in the dark about him. Hashtags like Clark Air and Lemonade Legacy started gaining traction. One tabloid even posted side-by-side images of Theo and Quentin with the caption, "Those eyes don't lie." Theo scrolled through it all in silence, the city moving outside his window like a world he no longer wanted to be part of. His phone buzzed again. Derek, legal counsel. Need to talk. Board wants clarification. Shareholders are nervous. Alicia, PR led. Do not issue a statement without looping me in. We can't afford another leak. Unknown number. You're reckless. You always were. That one? He knew exactly who sent it. He powered off the phone. In less than 24 hours, something private, something tender, had become a media-feeding frenzy. And the worst part? Amira and Quentin hadn't even been asked for their side. They were being picked apart, scrutinized, judged, and all because he stood on a sidewalk, stared too long at a boy who carried his blood, and reached for a woman the world had decided was less than. Theo clenched his jaw, chest rising with slow, deliberate breath. This wasn't about scandal. This was about control. And his family had just made one thing very clear. They weren't going to let go of the narrative without a fight. The Clark family estate sat on the edge of Long Island, 3 stories of ivory stone and cold windows that never seemed to reflect the sun. Theo hadn't been there in months. He didn't miss it. But today he walked through those familiar doors with a fire in his chest that not even the marble floors and silence could cool. His mother sat in the conservatory, surrounded by white orchids and unread newspapers. She wore her favorite navy silk robe, a cup of tea untouched beside her. She looked up when he entered, calm as ever. "I assume you've seen the press," she said, folding her tablet closed. "I assume you're the reason it's there." She raised a brow. "You're not naive, Theo. You made yourself a target the moment you got involved with that woman. Her name is Amira. I don't care what her name is. What matters is that she's dragging your reputation through the mud, along with that child." Theo stepped closer. "Don't you dare talk about my son like he's a stain." "Is he yours?" she asked, voice sharp. "Yes," Theo said. No hesitation. Victoria Clark's face didn't change. "Then congratulations. You've handed your enemies everything they need." Theo stared at her, disbelief mixing with something darker. "You're worried about enemies. I'm worried about a little boy growing up thinking he's something to be hidden." She placed her hands in her lap. "You were groomed for legacy. We protected you from distractions, from liabilities." "You didn't protect me," Theo snapped. "You erased her." His mother stood, slow and graceful. "We made decisions you weren't ready to make. You made decisions for me," he said. "And now you're still trying to—" Victoria took a step toward him. "Theo, if you stay with her, you'll lose everything we built." He blinked. "Good," he said. "Then I'll build something better." The air between them thickened. Theo's voice dropped, quieter but no less firm. "Tell me the truth. All of it." Victoria didn't blink. About what? About why she vanished. Why her family left overnight. Why I spent years thinking it was just bad timing. Her posture straightened. "Because we made sure you wouldn't chase after her." Theo's eyes narrowed. "You forced them out." "We made them an offer," she said flatly. "Relocation, paid expenses, fresh start somewhere far enough that you'd forget her face by the time college came." His throat burned. They were struggling. Her mother was cleaning office floors. Her father was in and out of jobs. It wasn't hard to convince them that leaving was the best option. "You paid them off," he said, disgust curling around every word. They accepted it. Theo stepped back, stunned. All this time, he thought fate had pulled them apart. But it wasn't fate. It was design. "Why?" he asked, voice raw. "She wasn't some threat. She was 12. I was 15. She wasn't our kind," Victoria said coldly. "She wasn't educated. Her parents didn't own anything. She was cute. She was charming. But she didn't belong in our future." He laughed bitterly. "So you had her erased?" We protected you." "No," he said, shaking his head. "You broke something in me that never healed." Victoria moved to sit again, calmly folding her robe at the waist. "You were always too emotional. That's why your father let me handle it." Theo stared at her, chest rising and falling. "You didn't just steal my first love," he said. "You stole my family. You can't build an empire on sentiment, Theo." He turned toward the door. "No, but you can build one on truth. Walk away from this," she warned, "before it destroys everything you've worked for." He paused in the doorway. "If loving her costs me everything, then I was building the wrong thing to begin with." And then he left. The boardroom inside Clark Holdings was filled with sharp suits and sharper eyes. 12 members sat around the polished table, hands folded, faces blank. Behind them, the city skyline stretched wide, gleaming, untouchable. But the tension in that room was thick enough to slice with a credit card. Theo entered without a word, ignoring the whispers, the glances, the carefully placed folders stamped confidential in red. At the head of the table, Charles Denning, senior board chair, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Theo, thank you for coming on short notice." Theo nodded. "Let's not pretend this is a routine check-in. You've made the front page of every major outlet this morning," Charles said plainly. "Shareholders are asking questions. They always do when someone humanizes a CEO. A few chuckles, a few frowns. Charles didn't smile. "Is it true?" "Yes," Theo said. "I have a son. His name is Quentin. His mother is Amira. And if anyone has a problem with that, you can speak directly to me." A silence followed, heavier than before. One of the younger members finally asked, "Are you planning to step back from the company?" Theo's eyes didn't flinch. "No." "Then what are you planning?" "I'm planning to stop living like I owe anyone an explanation for the parts of me that aren't tailored or profitable." Someone exhaled loudly. "Your mother's already made it clear. My mother doesn't run this company," Theo cut in. Charles leaned forward. "Theo, be careful. One scandal is manageable. Defiance is another thing entirely." Theo didn't raise his voice. "I built this empire with your approval," he said. "But I built it at the cost of the only person who ever made me feel like more than a brand. A beat of silence. And I won't keep building if I have to pretend I'm ashamed of my own blood." He stood. The room didn't applaud, but no one stopped him either. And that was enough, for now. Theo didn't speak as he left the boardroom. He didn't need to. The silence that followed him out of that high-rise building said more than any resolution or vote ever could. Outside, the air hit different. Cooler, cleaner. He took the elevator to the street level, stepped into his car, and drove without checking his phone once. Not a single notification mattered anymore. Not the market's mood, not his mother's warnings, not the press clippings flooding his inbox. Because somewhere across the city, a little boy was asking for a second cup of lemonade, and the woman who poured it had carried both of their lives without dropping a single piece. He didn't know what the board would decide. He didn't care. He was done choosing profits over people, done letting legacy be written by people who never earned the right to shape his story, done pretending love was a liability. Let's talk about it. If you were in Theo's shoes, millions at stake, shareholders breathing down your neck, family legacy on the line, would you walk away from it all for the one person who made you feel alive? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We're listening. The rain started slow, just a soft tapping on the glass outside Theo's office. But it didn't stay soft. By late evening, it was pouring hard enough to blur the skyline, thunder grumbling low, like the city itself was holding back something it needed to scream. Theo stared out the window, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, phone dark on his desk. The board hadn't followed up. His mother hadn't texted. But the message had been loud enough the first time. Walk away from her, or walk away from everything you built. He had choices. On paper, it was simple. Protect the company, protect his image, stay in line. But none of those options felt like choices anymore. He could still see her face that morning, half covered in sleep, her voice scratchy from dreaming. Quentin's tiny footsteps upstairs, the faint scent of cinnamon from her cafe kitchen still clinging to his clothes. It was real, tangible, and if he lost it again, it would be by his own silence. Still, he didn't tell her. He didn't call, didn't send a warning about the press, didn't mention the board's conversation or his mother's veiled threats. Because something in him knew, if he did, she might pull away. Not out of fear, out of principle, and he couldn't stomach that. Not tonight. Not when the only thing grounding him was the memory of her hand in his, her eyes looking at him like he was still that boy from the porch. He grabbed his coat, barely noticing the downpour as he stepped into the storm. His car waited downstairs, but he didn't use it. He walked, through the rain, through the wind, through the decision he'd already made but hadn't spoken aloud. He didn't need an umbrella. He needed her. Amira was closing up when she heard the knock. The storm outside was merciless, wind slapping against the windows, thunder growling low and steady, the kind of rain that soaked through to the bone in seconds. She paused with her hand on the light switch, unsure she heard right. Then came another knock, louder this time. Insistent. She opened the door just enough to peek through. Theo stood there, soaked, shirt clinging to his frame, hair dripping, eyes locked on hers like they were the only dry thing in his world. She didn't move at first, just stared. He didn't speak, didn't beg. He just stood in the storm, silent and waiting. She opened the door wider, enough for him to step inside. Water pooled beneath his shoes. The thunder outside cracked like a warning, but neither of them flinched. "You walked here?" she asked. He nodded. She blinked. "From where? Does it matter?" His voice was low, raspy from cold and maybe something heavier. She closed the door behind him and moved to the kitchen without saying more. Grabbed a towel, tossed it to him. "Quentin's sleeping," she said. Theo dried his face, but his eyes never left her. Amira crossed her arms. "You could have called. I didn't want to give you the chance to say no." "That's not romantic," she replied. "That's selfish." "I know," he said. "But I needed to see you." Lightning flashed. For a second, the entire cafe lit up in silver. Theo stepped forward. His soaked shirt clung to him, muscles twitching beneath the fabric. Rain still streaked from his hair to his jaw. Amira's breath caught, just once. "I'm tired of making the smart move," he said. "I came here for the right one." She didn't stop him when he closed the space between them. The rain beat against the windows like a second heartbeat. Theo stood just inches from her, soaked through, the storm still clinging to his skin. His breathing was deep, ragged, but controlled. Like a man restraining something primal. Amira didn't move. Not forward, not away. Her chest rose slowly, her arms still folded across her body, but her eyes gave her away. They were wide, wanting, waiting. Theo reached out, brushing a wet strand of hair from her cheek. His thumb lingered along the edge of her jaw. "You're still the only place I've ever wanted to come home to," he whispered. And then he kissed her. This wasn't the soft, aching kiss from before. This was raw, heavy, desperate. Her hands flew to his collar, pulling him in as she pressed him against the wall near the pantry door. Their mouths collided again, wet, fast, needy. His hands slid down her waist, gripping her thighs and lifting her effortlessly. She wrapped around him instantly, legs tightening as his back hit the brick wall behind them. They didn't make it to the counter. This time, there was no slow build, no pause. It was fire, pure and reckless. He pushed her against the wall, his hips grinding between her thighs as her dress rode up around her waist. She bit his bottom lip, hard enough to make him groan. His hands slid under her, one at her thigh, the other at the small of her back, pressing her flush against him. He kissed down her neck, across her collarbone, tasting rain and salt and something that belonged only to her. Amira gasped when he moved inside her, nails digging into his shoulder, head thrown back against the cool stone. Her moans came in sharp, breathless pulses, low, intimate, like they were echoing just for him. Their bodies didn't just move, they collided. Again, and again, and again. Their rhythm wasn't graceful. It was chaotic, hungry, built on everything they didn't say in the daylight, everything they swallowed for years, everything they buried while pretending to move on. The rain kept pounding outside, but in that moment, neither of them noticed. Theo's body moved with purpose, rough palms sliding beneath Amira's dress, dragging soft moans from her mouth with every thrust. His grip on her was firm but reverent, like he didn't know whether to worship or ruin her. She gave as much as she took. Her fingers gripped his wet shirt like she needed to feel the seams come apart. She bit his shoulder, kissed his jaw, pulled his name from deep inside her chest, like it had been waiting there since she was 15. "Say it again," he growled. "Say what?" "My name. Say it like that." She did, and it unraveled him. He pressed his forehead against hers as her legs trembled around him. Their sweat mixed with rain. Her dress was hiked up. His pants hung half open, and yet, in that wild tangle of heat and brick and thunder, there was nothing careless about it. It wasn't about the act. It was about the release of years, of silence, of all the moments they lost to someone else's decisions. When she came undone, she clung to him like she was trying to hold her own body together. Her moans turned into gasps, her gasps into quiet, broken cries. Theo followed her over the edge, jaw clenched, groaning into her shoulder as his body gave in. When it was over, they didn't speak. He held her, tight, breath shallow, eyes shut. Her head rested in the crook of his neck, and the storm outside, still crashing through the streets, suddenly sounded like peace. They slid to the floor together, tangled in silence in each other. The storm still whispered against the windows, but inside the cafe, it was warm, quiet in a way that didn't ask questions or demand explanations. Amira rested between Theo's legs, her back against his chest, her dress clinging in damp folds. He wrapped his arms around her, chin tucked near her temple. No one moved. No one rushed. The adrenaline faded, replaced by something softer. She turned her head just enough to see his face, eyes half-lidded but alert. "I meant to tell you to go home tonight," she murmured. "I would have ignored you." "I know." They both smiled. It didn't last. Amira's fingers fidgeted with the hem of her dress. She didn't look at him when she asked it. "If they made you choose," she said, voice low but clear, "between me and everything else, the company, your name, your legacy, would you?" Theo's heart kicked once, hard. He didn't answer right away. She finally looked back at him. "I'm not asking because I want some dramatic gesture," she said. "I just need to know if this, whatever this is, has room to grow, or if I'm just something you needed to feel for one more night." Theo's eyes locked on hers. "There's no one night anything between us," he said. "Not now. Not after this." She blinked. "That's not an answer." He didn't dodge it. "I made my decision before I ever stepped into that storm," he said. "I walked here, Amira, through everything. Not for a kiss, not for a night, for you." She searched his face for cracks. Found none. "Then say it," she whispered. Out loud. He leaned in, breath warm against her cheek. "I already did." The words didn't echo. They landed, heavy, quiet, final. "I already did." Amira sat still in his arms, the storm's rhythm humming behind her like applause neither of them asked for. She didn't move away, didn't press him for more, because deep down, she already knew. But hearing it, out loud, meant everything. She exhaled softly, leaned her head back against his chest, and closed her eyes. Theo wrapped his arms tighter around her. "You should have told me," she said, voice gentle, "about the board, the pressure, the fallout." "I didn't want you to carry it," he replied. "I'm not delicate, Theo." "I know," he said. "That's why I came here instead of staying there." Amira turned in his arms to face him. "If you lose it all," he met her gaze, "then I'll finally be free to build what matters." Her lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but it was close. "You really mean that?" she asked. Theo reached up and tucked a curl behind her ear. "Amira, I've had everything they said would make me a man. Power, wealth, influence. But none of it held me at night. None of it poured lemonade with our son. None of it tasted like your kiss." She blinked, swallowing hard. "I don't care if I have to walk away from every title I've ever held," he said. "You and Quentin are the only legacy that matters to me now." This time, her smile came through. Small, soft, real. She cupped his face. "You still talk like the kid who promised me a treehouse and a lemonade stand. Guess I still owe you the treehouse." She leaned in, pressing her lips to his once more. No rush, no fire. Just promise. "I don't need a treehouse anymore," she whispered. Theo pulled her closer. "Then I'll build you a kingdom." And for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt like they were waiting for the other shoe to drop. They'd already lived the storm. Now they were choosing each other, on purpose. The morning after the storm, the city had calmed. The rain was gone, but the streets were still wet, mirroring the quiet tension hanging in the air. Amira opened the cafe early, hair pulled into a loose bun, apron tied at the waist, Quentin still upstairs finishing his cereal. She moved through the routine without needing to think. Prep the dough, start the espresso machine, refill the sugar jars. The bell over the door jingled just after 9. She didn't look up at first. "Give me a second," she called, still focused on aligning a row of fresh croissants. "Take all the time you need," a smooth voice replied. That voice made her stop. She turned. A tall man in a tailored charcoal suit stood just inside the door, black leather gloves in one hand, a briefcase in the other. He looked like Theo, but not. Same sharp jawline, same eyes, but colder. Calculated. "Amira Monroe," he said, stepping closer. "I'm Julian." Her brow creased. "And you are?" "Theo's half-brother." She didn't respond. Not with a greeting. Not with a welcome. Julian smiled like someone used to owning rooms. "I won't take much of your time," he said, setting the briefcase gently on the counter. Amira narrowed her eyes. "Did Theo send you?" "No," Julian replied. "He doesn't know I'm here. He's made it clear he doesn't want to be protected." She crossed her arms. "And you think I need protecting? I think you need clarity." He popped the briefcase open and spun it toward her. Inside, a manila folder, a check, and a neatly bound legal document. "I came with a solution," he said. Amira didn't move. "To what?" Julian smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "To the problem that's been making headlines all week." Amira didn't touch the briefcase. She looked at the folder, then at Julian's face, her expression unreadable. He tapped the top sheet with 2 fingers. "That's a standard non-disclosure agreement. Clean, legal, straightforward. And the check? 7 figures, he said casually. Enough to relocate. Open another cafe. Disappear if you're smart." Amira's face didn't change. Julian continued, as if she hadn't already started to seethe behind her eyes. "You'll find there are no loopholes, no predatory language. Our legal team made sure of that. All we're asking is your silence. For Quentin's sake, of course." Her mouth twitched. "For Quentin's sake?" Julian nodded, voice smooth like honey. "You seem like a good mother. This media chaos, it won't be kind to a boy like him. Mixed background, no father on the record. School kids can be cruel. Best to avoid the circus while you still can." Amira stared at him, motionless. "You want me to take money to erase his story," she said. "We want to keep the Clark name protected." She raised an eyebrow. "From what? A child?" Julian folded his hands. "From noise. Theo's emotional decisions are putting the company at risk. You can help bring this to a close, quietly, without any additional drama." Amira stepped around the counter slowly. She was calm, but it was the kind of calm that came before a storm hit the walls. "I've run this cafe with 2 hands and no shortcuts," she said. "And I've raised my son with more love than your entire family knows what to do with." Julian didn't blink. "And that's commendable. But let's be honest, this is the highest offer you'll ever receive for doing absolutely nothing." Her voice dropped. "I'd rather be broke in truth than rich in silence." He opened his mouth to reply. She raised her hand to stop him. "You came here thinking I could be bought like a product off a shelf." She stepped closer. "You're about to learn I'm not for sale." Amira reached into the briefcase. Julian didn't stop her. Maybe he thought she was about to take the deal. Maybe he thought he'd won. She pulled the check out slowly, holding it up between 2 fingers like it was something unclean. 7 figures, huh?" she said. He gave her a tight nod. "Untaxed, discreet. Yours?" She looked at it for a beat. Not because she was tempted, but because she was disgusted. Then, without a word, she tore it, right down the middle. Julian's jaw tightened as the paper split with a clean rip. She didn't stop there. She tore it again, and again, until nothing was left but confetti in her hands. Then she dropped the shredded pieces onto the counter and leaned in. "You don't get to come into my place, flash your money, and try to erase my son like he's bad per—" Julian's smile faded completely now. "You just turned down a future most people dream of." "No," she said. "I just protected the future I already have." He stared at her. "This was a gift." "No," she said again, sharper this time. "This was a bribe. And I don't raise Quentin in a world where men like you get to buy dignity off desperate women." He adjusted his cufflinks slowly. "Then you've chosen your path." Amira folded her arms. "I already had one. You just walked into it thinking you could rearrange it." Julian stepped back from the counter, snapping the briefcase shut with precision. "You'll regret this." She laughed under her breath. "No. But you will." He moved toward the door, pausing just before he opened it. "You've made things harder for him." Amira's voice was clear. Steady. I've made things honest. And then she turned her back to him. Because no amount of zeros would ever be worth teaching her son to stay small just to keep powerful men comfortable. The door shut behind Julian with a thud that echoed longer than it should have. Amira stood there, hands planted on the counter, breathing slow but steady. Her chest rose and fell like someone holding back more than anger, something deeper, older, righteous. She looked down at the pile of ripped paper still scattered across the wood, and then she swept it into the trash. Just as she turned back toward the espresso machine, the bell above the door jingled again. But this time it wasn't a stranger. A woman from the neighborhood stepped in, Mrs. Green, holding a tote bag and a damp umbrella. "You open?" she asked cheerfully. Amira wiped her palms on her apron and nodded. "Always." She poured the usual, 2 shots. No foam. Added a small lemon tart to the bag without charging. Mrs. Green didn't question it. But as Amira rang her up, her voice came softer. "You okay, baby? You look like you've just been through something." Amira hesitated, then smiled, tired but proud. "Someone came in here today thinking my son was a liability." Mrs. Green's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" "They said he was a problem, that it would be better if he disappeared from the headlines, that it would be better if I took money and stayed silent." Mrs. Green stiffened. "You didn't?" Amira shook her head. "I ripped that check up so fast I think it startled him." Then her voice turned low, firm. "My son is not a scandal." She said it like she meant it for more than the man who brought the offer. She said it for everyone who ever looked at her child and saw inconvenience instead of worth. He's joy, he's light, he's a miracle wrapped in chocolate skin and stubborn questions. And anyone who has a problem with him can choke on their entitlement. Mrs. Green blinked, then laughed. "You're a good mama," she said. "I'm his mama," Amira replied, "and that's my greatest title." Just as Mrs. Green walked out with her coffee and a knowing smile, the soft thump of little feet echoed down the stairs. Amira turned, wiping her hands as Quentin appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas, hair slightly wild from sleep. He rubbed one eye with his fist. "Mama." She crouched down immediately. "Hey, baby, what are you doing up already?" He looked around the cafe, spotting the torn paper in the trash and the half-empty coffee mug on the counter. "There was a man," he said. "He was loud." Amira nodded slowly. "Yeah. He came to talk about something, but it's over now." Quentin shuffled closer, frowning. "Was he mad?" "No," she said, "but he was wrong." Quentin blinked. "About what?" She took both his hands in hers and looked him square in the eyes. "He said some things about you that weren't kind, things that made it sound like you should be hidden or forgotten." Quentin's small face twisted, confused. "But I'm not bad." Her throat tightened, but her smile stayed strong. "No, sweetheart, you are the best thing I've ever done. You're smart and brave and full of questions. You're everything I ever prayed for, and more." Quentin tilted his head. "So why'd he say that stuff?" She brushed his curls gently. "Because some people don't understand that love doesn't follow rules they made up, and when they see something they can't control, they try to make it disappear." He frowned. "You didn't let him?" "Never," she said, pulling him into a tight hug. "No one takes you from me. No one writes our story for us. Got it?" He nodded against her shoulder, arms wrapping around her. They stayed like that for a while, mother and son in the quiet heart of a small cafe that had already survived storms bigger than money and louder than threats. And when Amira finally stood, Quentin still holding her hand, she looked out the front window and whispered to herself, "I dare them to try again." The office was quieter than usual. It wasn't the hour. It was the atmosphere. Theo walked through the top floor of Clark Holdings with purpose, shoulders squared, jaw set, every step echoing through the hall like punctuation. His assistant stood as he passed. "The board's in the conference room, sir. They're expecting your decision." "I won't need long," he said. The doors opened, and the board turned, every face stiff with anticipation, some concerned, some annoyed, one or two relieved. Theo didn't bother sitting. He walked to the head of the table and placed a sealed envelope in front of Charles Denning. "This is my formal resignation," he said. "Effective immediately." No one spoke for a full 5 seconds. Then Charles cleared his throat. "You understand what this means, Theo? You're stepping away from a company you built from the ground up?" Theo nodded. "Exactly. I built it, which means I know what it cost." Your name is on half of the patents. Your family. My family, Theo cut in, is a woman who built a life from scratch without a single favor. And a 5-year-old boy who looks like me and asks questions I can finally answer. A rustle of chairs. A few murmurs. You're making a mistake, one member said. I've made bigger ones, Theo replied. Staying silent would be the worst. Charles looked down at the envelope. You walk away from this, there's no coming back. I'm not looking back, Theo said. Not anymore. He turned and walked toward the door without waiting for permission. Someone called out after him. What are you going to do now? Theo paused at the exit. Something honest. And then he left, without his title, without his seat at the table, without regret. Because the next words he spoke wouldn't be confined to boardrooms. They would be spoken to the world. The media room at the downtown event center hadn't been used in months, but by the time Theo stepped up to the podium, it was packed. Reporters filled every seat. Camera lenses glinted under the bright lights. Microphones lined the edge of the podium like a wall waiting to be torn down. He didn't bring a publicist. Didn't prepare a statement. He wore a simple navy suit, no tie, shirt collar slightly open. When he looked into the crowd, he didn't see strangers. He saw voices, narratives, headlines waiting to shape his life for him. Again, he took a breath, then leaned into the mic. My name is Theo Clark. Until this morning, I was CEO of Clark Holdings. But today, I'm just a man who got tired of living a lie. The room hushed. I've built skyscrapers, led global teams, signed contracts worth more than most people will ever see. But I lost something in the process. He paused, scanning the room. Actually, I lost someone. Flashbulbs popped. Hands shot up. Theo ignored them. 27 years ago, the person I loved most was taken from me without warning. Her name is Amira, and 5 years ago she had my child. A collective gasp swept through the room. Yes, he said, steady. I have a son. His name is Quentin. And he's not a secret. He is my blood, my pride, my legacy. Reporters shouted questions now. Cameras snapped like thunder. Why now? Why did you resign? Is the child really yours? Theo raised a hand. I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to own the truth, because the people who made me believe silence was protection were wrong. He leaned closer to the mic, voice unwavering. I don't care how this plays in boardrooms or dinner tables. I care how it plays in my son's eyes when he learns to read. And just like that, he flipped the narrative. Not from scandal to spin, from silence to truth. The murmurs hadn't settled when Theo stepped back up to the mic. But this time, he didn't speak like a CEO. He spoke like a man who'd waited too long to say the words that mattered. I'm not just here to talk about my son, he said. I'm here to talk about his mother. Silence gripped the room again. She's not a socialite, not from old money. She didn't go to Ivy League schools or appear on any magazine covers. She runs a small cafe near Jefferson Park. It's called Amira's Place. And she built it with her own 2 hands. He didn't read from a paper. He didn't glance at notes. He just spoke, calm, grounded, eyes clear. Her name is Amira Monroe. When we were kids, I loved her. When we were torn apart, I tried to move on. I buried myself in business, ambition, titles. He exhaled slowly. But none of it mattered without her. Some of the reporters stopped taking notes. They just listened. Amira is the strongest woman I've ever known. She raised Quentin on her own. No favors, no help, no headlines. She taught him joy, dignity, resilience. And when I found them again, I realized I didn't just want to claim them as part of my life. He paused, this time because emotion crept into his throat. I wanted to rebuild my life around them. A hush fell over the room. Theo cleared his throat, gripping the sides of the podium. Let this be clear. Amira Monroe is not a footnote, not a complication. And Quentin is not a scandal. They are my family. They are my future. And starting today, I choose them above everything else. More questions erupted, but Theo held his ground. He didn't need to answer all of them. He'd already said the only names that mattered. And the world would remember. The moment Theo stepped away from the podium, the wave hit. Social media exploded before he even left the building. Some headlines praised him. Billionaire CEO chooses love over legacy. Theo Clark breaks silence, claims son publicly others weren't so kind. Secret love child scandal. Clark Holdings in crisis, stock drops after former CEO confesses to hidden family. The market trembled. Shareholders panicked. PR teams scrambled. But Theo? He walked through the side corridor of the building, tie loosened, phone off, expression unreadable. Not because he was afraid, because he was finally free. As he neared the back exit, his assistant caught up. "Mr. Clark." "Theo," she corrected herself. "You're trending. The internet's split. Half the people are calling you a hero. The other half—" "Let them," he said, voice low. "They don't get to write my ending." "But the fallout—" He turned to her. "For who? The ones who never showed up when I was drowning in profit, but starving for purpose?" She said nothing. Theo exhaled. "This is the first time I've ever told the whole truth out loud," he said. "Feels like breathing." When he stepped outside, the sun was waiting. So were the cameras. And the people. A small crowd had gathered. Press, pedestrians, strangers with phones out. As soon as he emerged, applause broke through the noise. It started small. One person, then another, until it became a wall of claps, cheers, and the occasional teary smile. Not everyone clapped. Some stood back, arms folded, eyes cold. But Theo didn't shrink. He walked through it, head held high, every step forward dragging the weight of his past into the light. Because he knew what waited just beyond the crowd. And for the first time in years, it was worth walking toward. Theo emerged from the tangle of reporters and cameras, ignoring every question tossed his way. He didn't owe them anything more, but he owed her everything. Past the line of security, past the velvet ropes, past the noise and frenzy. She stood across the street. Amira, hair pinned back, hoops in her ears, a soft blouse clinging to her curves. No press badge, no microphone, just presence. She had Quentin's favorite hoodie folded over her arm, and her arms crossed beneath her chest, guarded but unmoved. Theo stopped at the curb. For a moment, he just watched her. She didn't run to him, didn't smile. She tilted her head and looked at him like she was still deciding. He stepped off the sidewalk. One step. Two. Until the noise faded, and it was just them in the middle of the city like it always should have been. "You saw it," he said. She nodded once. "You said my name," she said. "In front of the world." "I meant every syllable." Another beat of silence passed between them. "I told you not to turn me into a statement," she said. "I didn't," he replied. "I told the truth. I told our truth." Her eyes flickered. "You gave up your empire. I never owned anything worth more than what I lost." She looked down, lips tightening, emotion warring behind her expression. "And if this backfires?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "I've been rich. I've been lonely. I'll take broke and whole any day." That finally broke through her walls. Amira stepped forward, hoodie slipping from her arm. Her fingers reached up and brushed a curl from his forehead. And that was enough. The world didn't go quiet when Theo leaned in. The city kept humming. Horns blared. People shouted. Phones stayed raised. Flash after flash lit up the space around them like strobes. But for Theo, all of it disappeared. Because Amira was right in front of him, eyes deep with fear, fire, and something softer she hadn't shown in years. "Last chance," she whispered, inches from his lips. "You sure you want your name attached to mine?" Theo smiled, leaning closer. "My name doesn't mean a damn thing without yours beside it." She didn't wait. She pulled him in by the collar and kissed him like 27 years were catching up all at once. Not tender, not timid. It was bold. Public. Irrevocable. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Shutters clicked. Someone cheered. But Theo didn't hear it. All he felt was her mouth on his, her hands pressed flat against his chest, her heartbeat sinking with his as the sidewalk melted beneath their feet. When they broke apart, her forehead rested against his. "We just burned the last of your clean image," she whispered. "Good," he breathed. "Now I can start living real." Across the street, someone shouted, "That's love, baby." Another voice yelled, "Marry that woman, Clark." Theo didn't look up. He looked into her. "I already have," he said. And Amira, finally, smiled without hesitation, because the truth had been spoken. The risk had been taken. And in the middle of chaos, the love they'd fought to reclaim stood undeniable. Right there on the street, right in front of the world. A year later, the air smelled of citrus and sunlight. Rows of lemon trees lined the backyard of Amira's place. their branches heavy with yellow fruit that glowed under the late afternoon sky. String lights crisscrossed overhead, swaying gently in the breeze, and guests fanned themselves with handcrafted programs shaped like lemon wedges. No ballroom, no corporate sponsors, just wood chairs on warm grass, laughter, music, and the feeling that something sacred was about to happen. Theo stood at the front, under a small arch made of intertwined lemon branches and white linen. He wore a cream suit, his shirt unbuttoned at the top just enough to show the chain Amira had given him months earlier, a tiny pendant shaped like a bike. He had no tie, no pretense, only eyes locked on the woman who stepped forward as the crowd stood. Amira. She walked barefoot, her champagne-colored dress hugging every beautiful curve. Golden thread glistened through her coiled hair, and in her hands she held a bouquet of yellow roses wrapped in the same ribbon she used to tie Quentin's hair when he was a baby. She didn't wear a veil. She had nothing to hide. Every step she took was deliberate, rooted, free. And as she walked, the breeze carried whispers from guests who watched in awe. She's glowing. She built this place from nothing. That boy didn't just fall in love. He found his way back home. Theo swallowed hard. The last time he'd seen her under sunlight like this, she was riding ahead of him on a bike, laughing over her shoulder. Now she was walking toward him again, but not as a memory, as his forever. She stopped in front of him and reached for his hands. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her eyes were steady. "You made it," she whispered. "I had to," he murmured back. "You're the only finish line that ever mattered." The officiant cleared his throat, but no one heard him, because every soul present knew this wasn't just a wedding. It was the moment two people who'd waited half a lifetime finally arrived. Before the ceremony began, guests gathered around the cafe, Amira's place, laughing, sipping lemonade, and exchanging stories beneath the sun. The little cafe that once barely paid its rent now had lines that stretched around the block every weekend. Locals knew it as more than a place to eat. It was where people found warmth, a listening ear, a space to be seen. Kids ran in and out, their shoes thudding on the hardwood floors Amira had laid herself. Retired couples sat at the back patio, playing checkers on the stone tables Theo had installed after one too many of Amira's subtle jabs about his fancy hands needing to actually build something. The walls inside were filled with framed photographs, Theo painting one of the cafe's benches with Quentin. Amira at the ribbon cutting for the small reading nook they opened for neighborhood kids. An old photo of Amira as a teenager, clutching her lemonade stand sign next to a blurry version of young Theo, caught mid-laugh. Theo had offered to expand the cafe, franchise it, build more. Amira refused. "I don't need a chain," she told him. "I need roots." So they built it deeper, not wider. There was a garden now behind the cafe, a mural on the side wall depicting a black woman holding a lemon in one hand and a child's hand in the other. Below it were the words, "Strength is sweet and sharp, just like lemonade." Today, the cafe was closed to the public, but the energy hadn't left. It had multiplied. Friends brought food they cooked in Amira's kitchen. Local musicians played jazz out front under the awning. The staff she trained, all single mothers, artists, and students, floated through the crowd, not as employees, but family. And Theo? He didn't own a single square foot of the place, but he belonged to it, because this wasn't a business. It was hers, and he had never felt more proud to be part of something he didn't build, but got to honor. The music shifted, soft, playful, familiar. Every guest turned toward the path lined with lemon trees. And there he was, Quentin, 5 years old and freshly determined, wearing a tiny white suit with suspenders, his curls fluffed and bouncing with each careful step. He held the ring box like it was gold, because to him it was. The little boy who once peeked shyly through the doorway of the cafe now walked down the aisle like he was marching straight into his legacy. Theo's eyes misted over as Quentin approached, but he blinked fast, unwilling to miss a single second. The boy reached the front, looked up at his father with a small, proud smirk, and whispered loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Told you I wouldn't drop it." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Theo knelt and met his eyes. "You did perfect, champ." Quentin glanced up at Amira, who had tears clinging to the corners of her lashes. "I'm ready now," he said. She smiled down at him. "You were born ready." The officiant chuckled. "Shall we begin?" But no one moved until Quentin nodded first. Because somewhere between the lemon trees and the heartbeat of that little cafe, everyone knew this wasn't just Theo and Amira's day. It was Quentin's, too. He wasn't a secret. He was the bridge, the air, the heartbeat of every vow yet to be spoken. And as he took his seat beside his grandmother, Amira's mother, dressed in a deep blue head wrap in proud silence, he swung his legs gently, ring box still clutched tight in his lap, watching his parents get ready to make forever official. The officiant nodded, giving Theo the floor. Theo turned to face Amira fully, both of her hands held in his. His breath trembled at first, but his voice didn't shake. "I've spent my life building towers," he began, his gaze never leaving hers. "Glass ones, steel ones, ones that scrape the sky and shine under the weight of my ambition." He paused. "They called me a visionary, a genius, a man who could create anything from nothing. But every night I went home to walls that echoed, rooms that heard my footsteps but never my laughter, a bed that never remembered warmth." A hush fell over the crowd. He swallowed hard. "All those years, I thought I was building a legacy. Turns out I was just keeping busy, trying to forget the girl who gave me lemonade with a crooked smile and raced me down the hill with skinned knees." Amira smiled through her tears. "I've stood at the top of the world, Amira, and none of it mattered until I saw you again, behind a table with a pitcher of lemon and a fire still in your eyes." Theo reached into his pocket and pulled out a single folded paper, old, worn at the edges. "My first business plan," he said with a soft laugh. "Age 10. Want to hear what it says?" He opened it carefully. Step 1, marry Amira. The crowd let out a collective breath. Some laughed, others wiped their cheeks. Theo looked back at her. "It's taken me 27 years, but I'm finally making good on that step." His voice cracked now, just once. "You are my first dream, my only peace, my true home, and I vow, for the rest of my life, I will never build anything that doesn't have you in it." He folded the paper again and tucked it into her hand. "I'm done with skyscrapers, baby. I'm ready to build us." Amira wiped the corners of her eyes, breathing in through her nose, steadying herself. She glanced at the lemon trees swaying behind Theo, then looked back into the eyes of the boy, now man, she never stopped carrying somewhere inside her. "I don't have skyscrapers to compare you to," she said gently. "I never had a company or a corner office. What I had was a table, a pitcher, and a dream I couldn't afford to say out loud." The crowd leaned in. "When my parents moved me away, I cried every night for months, and not just because I missed my home, but because I didn't get to say goodbye to the only boy who ever looked at me like I mattered, not for how I looked, not for how much I had, but for who I was." She touched his cheek softly. "You remembered me as sweetness, but I remember you as courage. You used to bring me spare change for my stand, fix my chain when it slipped off my bike. You were the first person to believe in me, even when I didn't." Amira let her hand drop, curling her fingers into his. "I've spent years surviving, Theo, wiping counters, raising a son, and learning to protect my peace. Life didn't hand me anything easy, but I held on to my dignity, my joy, my value, and I taught Quentin to do the same." Her voice softened to a whisper only he could hear. "I don't need a king, Theo." She paused. "I just need the boy who once split his sandwich with me under the sun and told me I made the best lemonade in the world." A single tear traced down her cheek. "And now, I have him again." She smiled, radiant, unshaken. "So I vow to never forget where we started, even as we grow into everything we're meant to be. I vow to challenge you when you forget to rest, to stand by you when the world forgets your humanity, and to raise our son to know that love isn't about wealth. It's about return." The officiant barely finished announcing them as husband and wife before the soft strum of a guitar floated across the courtyard. It wasn't a DJ. It was a neighborhood teenager who played on weekends outside the cafe for tips. Amira insisted he perform. Theo agreed instantly. Under the lemon trees, Theo held out his hand. Amira took it without hesitation. There was no choreographed routine, no rehearsed steps, just two people swaying to the rhythm of a love that had refused to die. Guests fell quiet, letting the music fill the space with old memories. It wasn't just a dance, it was a return. As they moved together, Amira rested her head on Theo's chest. He held her tighter, as if anchoring himself to the moment. "I've never felt more grounded," he whispered. "You've always had a good rhythm," she teased softly. Theo chuckled. "You used to say I had 2 left feet. You did?" They spun gently, her bare feet brushing over the stone patio. Theo's shoes were long gone. He'd slipped them off as soon as he saw her approach the aisle barefoot. No need for pretense, No need to be anyone but the boy who once chased her on a bike and the man who'd spent years missing her. Off to the side, Quentin tugged at his bow tie, seated on his grandmother's lap. He clapped for them, then leaned against her shoulder and yawned. The trees overhead rustled. Lemon blossoms floated down, kissing Amira's curls. Theo caught one in his hand and tucked it behind her ear. "Perfect," he said. She smiled and kissed his cheek. No skyscraper could have given me this. Their foreheads touched. Their feet slowed. Their world, once built from pain and loss, now stood steady in joy. The music faded, but their dance, like their love, was far from over. The stars had taken over the sky. The courtyard was nearly empty now. Chairs stacked, dishes cleared, laughter slowly drifting into memory. Inside the house behind Amira's cafe, quiet had settled like a warm blanket. Quentin lay curled in his bed, half under the covers, still wearing one sock and a frosting-smudged bow tie. His hand clutched the velvet ring box he'd carried earlier down the aisle. Amira stood at the doorway, arms crossed loosely, watching him sleep. Theo came up behind her, gently wrapping his arms around her waist. "He passed out mid-sentence," she whispered. Theo grinned. He had a big day, carried the weight of the entire ceremony like a pro. They stood in silence for a beat, listening to his soft breathing. Theo rested his chin on her shoulder. "You think he knows how much he changed my life?" Amira nodded slowly. "I tell him every day." Theo kissed her temple. "Then I'll tell him every night." She turned into his chest, arms draping around his neck. "Let's put the heir to bed and enjoy what's left of our wedding night." Theo swept her up in his arms without another word. No tuxedo, no shoes, no fancy backdrop. Just him, her, and the soft glow of the hallway lights as he carried his wife into the room that now belonged to both of them. The door clicked shut. But down the hall, in the quiet corner of a world finally at peace, their son slept, safe, loved, and whole. He wasn't just the beginning of their family. He was the reason they found their way back, and the bridge into everything that would come next. The bedroom smelled faintly of lemon oil and fresh linen. The window was open just enough to let the night breeze graze bare skin. Theo set her down gently on the edge of the bed. But he didn't rush. He stood there for a moment, just looking at her. The woman who once sold him lemonade as a girl, who now stood in front of him as his wife, his equal. Amira watched him right back, eyes heavy with desire, but also something deeper. "Still want to build with me?" she teased softly. Theo stepped forward and knelt between her legs. "I want to worship," he whispered. His hands traced the hem of her dress and slowly, reverently, lifted it over her head. She sat in nothing but gold lace and moonlight. When she reached for him, he didn't hesitate. He undressed like he was peeling away the last layer of the past. They kissed slow, not rushed, not wild. It was deliberate, focused, like two people building something sacred, brick by brick, sigh by sigh. Amira gasped softly as Theo's mouth moved down her chest. His lips reverent, his touch sure. He mapped her body like it was a country he never wanted to leave again. Her legs wrapped around his waist as he pressed into her, their breaths tangled, their hands locked, her name whispered like devotion against her collarbone. No pretense, no performance, just real. Her back arched, and she held onto him with a need that spoke of years lost, of hunger and healing at once. When she came undone beneath him, her moan broke open something in him. He followed, burying himself deeper, whispering her name like a promise. Afterward, their bodies still twined, her head resting against his chest, Theo kissed her shoulder. "You feel like mine," he said quietly. Amira smiled. "I've always been yours. I just forgot for a while." And in that room, under the weight of soft sheets and sacred silence, they became more than husband and wife. They became one. The moonlight poured across their skin like silver silk. Amira lay on her back, her chest rising and falling slowly, a peaceful smile on her face as Theo ran his hand over her stomach, gentle, thoughtful. He propped himself up on one elbow and looked at her with a softness few ever got to see. Not the board, not the business world. Just her. His fingertips danced lightly over her navel, slow circles that made her shiver. She raised a brow. "You thinking of putting a logo there?" Theo chuckled. "Thinking of making this belly round again?" Amira blinked, then burst into a breathy laugh. "We just got married, and you already plotting?" He leaned in and pressed a kiss right beneath her ribs. "I'm not plotting," he murmured. "I'm hoping." He kissed lower, praying. Another kiss. Dreaming. Amira's smile softened, her hand drifting into his curls. You want a house full of tiny Theos, don't you? He grinned against her skin. Not just mine, ours. I want more of this, more of you. More little feet running through the cafe, more laughter spilling out of our home. He rested his cheek on her stomach, like it was sacred ground. I missed 5 years with Quentin, he said quietly. I won't miss another heartbeat. Amira stared at the ceiling, overwhelmed by the peace in the moment. After everything, every fight, every storm, every wall, this was what she was left with. A man who didn't just want her body or her business. He wanted her future. She stroked his hair slowly. What if it's a girl? Then she'll own the cafe by 8 and run the company by 10. Amira laughed again, louder this time. But her eyes watered, just a little, because for the first time in a long, long time, she believed in what tomorrow might bring. Theo rolled to his side, propping his head up with one hand as Amira stretched beside him, bare and glowing. The sheet clung to her curves in lazy folds, her skin still warm from their love. He watched her with a grin tugging at the corner of his lips. You know what I've realized? He said. Amira turned her head. What? I've built entire floors of skyscrapers, but I've never built something that actually made my heart beat. She smirked. Is this where you say something poetic about foundations and bricks? No, he replied, leaning closer, his voice husky but playful. This is where I ask you to help me build something even bigger. Amira raised a brow. Bigger than a billion-dollar tech company? Way bigger, he whispered. Let's build an empire of heartbeats. She blinked. Her lips parted just slightly, caught between amusement and surprise. An empire of heartbeats? She repeated. Theo nodded solemnly. Babies, laughter, little feet running on hardwood floors, sticky fingers, spilled lemonade, dance parties in the kitchen, a life that echoes forever. Amira shook her head, a smile slowly blooming. You're not slick, Mr. Clark. I'm very slick, he teased. Just not as slick as you think. She pushed his chest playfully. Let's not forget who already carried and raised your first heartbeat while you were out building your empire. I haven't forgotten, he said, eyes locking onto hers. I'm trying to catch up. Her smile faded into something tender. She pulled him closer by the chain around his neck and whispered against his lips. If we do this, it's on my terms. Theo grinned. Name the terms. Late-night cravings are your responsibility. Done. You handle all diaper blowouts. He pretended to wince. Even the catastrophic ones. Especially those. They both laughed. And in that room, naked, safe, married, and deliriously in love, they laid the blueprint for a new kind of legacy. Not concrete and steel, but blood, love, and breath. Theo lay back against the headboard, arms folded behind his head, watching Amira with that crooked grin she had no defenses for. She sat up slowly, the bedsheet falling to her waist, curls tousled, cheeks flushed. She reached for the water on the nightstand, then glanced back over her shoulder. So, she said, sipping, if we're building this empire of heartbeats. Theo turned toward her amused. Yeah? I get naming rights. His brow rose. To the babies? To the lemonade flavors. Theo blinked. I just laid out our future, and you're talking about juice? Juice is serious business, billionaire. He laughed. All right, name one. She narrowed her eyes thoughtfully. Let's see. How about sunset squeeze? He tilted his head. Sounds like a cocktail. What's in it? Fresh raspberries, a hint of ginger, a splash of lime, and love. Love tastes like lime? In my world, it does. Theo rolled toward her, reached out, and tugged her into his chest. You're going to run me out of business. Amira laid her head against his shoulder. Nope, I'm just going to flavor our legacy. He kissed the top of her head. Fine, but I get naming rights to baby number 2. She chuckled. Baby number 2? He pulled back slightly, eyes playful. You said naming rights. You didn't say I couldn't negotiate volume. Lord, what have I married? She sighed, grinning. The man who's going to stock your cafe with 20 years' worth of taste testers. They both laughed, wrapped in each other's warmth, the sound spilling into the quiet room like a promise. Because love, in their world, came sweetened, one recipe, one heartbeat at a time. Morning came soft and golden. The scent of brewed coffee and fresh lemons wafted through the cafe. Light filtered in through the big front windows, casting a warm glow on the wooden floors that had seen laughter, heartache, and rebirth. Amira stood behind the counter, apron tied around her waist, hair pinned up, cheeks still warm from the night before. Theo stood at the window beside Quentin, helping him balance a fresh tray of mini lemon tarts. The boy giggled, tongue peeking out the corner of his mouth in concentration. "Steady," Theo whispered. "That's your kingdom right there." Quentin looked up, proud. "It's for Mommy's customers." Theo ruffled his curls. "Then serve it like royalty." The bell above the door jingled as the first customers stepped in. Neighbors, friends, a couple of tourists who'd read about Amira's place in a food blog. The little boy behind the counter waved proudly. Outside the cafe, just above the doorway, the neon sign hummed quietly to life under the rising sun. Amira's place. Love served daily, not just lemonade, not just lattes, but family, growth, forgiveness, legacy. Theo stepped out the front door and looked up at the sign, hands in his pockets, jaw tight with emotion. He had built towers that kissed the clouds, bought companies with a signature, signed contracts worth more than most cities made in a year, but nothing felt like this. This glow, this sign, this woman, this boy, this life. Amira stepped beside him, slipping her hand into his. "You ever miss the boardroom?" He turned to her, eyes full. Not for 1 second. They stood there together as more people filtered into the cafe. The empire he thought he needed was gone. The one he was building now? It beat with laughter, breathed with love, and tasted faintly of raspberries, lime, and forgiveness. The front wheels wobbled. Theo ran beside Quentin, one hand lightly gripping the back of the little bike seat, the other hovering by his side. "You got it, champ," he said, jogging alongside. "Keep your eyes ahead. Don't look down." Quentin's tongue peeked out as he concentrated. His feet pumped furiously on the pedals, wobbling through the warm morning air. "I'm gonna fall," he shouted. "You're not," Theo called back, slowing just a little. "I've got you. I'm scared." "That's okay," Theo said, releasing the seat gently. "You're still moving." Quentin pedaled 2 more strokes, then coasted, then swerved into the grass. He fell sideways. Theo reached him before he could even sniffle. Hey, what's the rule?" Quentin sniffed, brushing at his eyes. "Get up and try again." Theo nodded. "Exactly." He stood the bike back up and ruffled his son's curls. "You're already doing better than I ever did." "Really?" Quentin asked, eyes wide. "Absolutely. First time I tried, I knocked over Mrs. Paget's mailbox and got chased by her cat." Quentin giggled. Theo bent down and whispered, "Want to know the trick?" "What?" "You just gotta believe the ground won't eat you." Quentin laughed harder this time, and Theo couldn't help it. He pulled his boy into a tight hug. Just a few feet away, sunlight spilled across the front of the cafe, and behind the glass window, Amira watched them, hand resting gently on her growing belly. Her family, her life, her second chance in motion. Inside the cafe, Amira stood near the window with a dish towel in one hand and the other resting gently over the soft swell of her belly. She wasn't due for months, but the little flutters had already started. A quiet rhythm beneath her skin, a heartbeat dancing beside her own. Her eyes followed Theo and Quentin outside, laughter drifting through the open cafe door like music. Quentin was back on the bike, wobbling again, determined again. And Theo? Theo was patient, steady, always one step behind, but never in the way. Amira pressed her fingertips against the glass, smiling to herself. This wasn't the dream she'd scribbled in journals as a girl. It was better. It was earned. The cafe behind her hummed with life. A young couple sipped lattes near the window. An elderly man read a newspaper near the back. Her lemon tart special was sold out by noon almost every day now. But in this quiet moment, hand on belly, eyes on her boys, Amira felt something deeper than success. Peace. A soft kick nudged her ribs. She chuckled and whispered, "That's your big brother out there. He thinks he's invincible." Another kick. And that man beside him, that's the one who never gave up on us, even when I stopped believing he'd ever come. She closed her eyes just for a second, then opened them again, to sunlight, to wheels turning, to love in motion. Theo looked up and caught her gaze through the glass. He smiled. She smiled back, then mouthed two words, "We're okay." And for the first time in a long time, she truly meant it. Theo sat on the cafe patio, a mug of warm lemonade in front of him. Quentin nestled quietly on his lap. Across from them, a young reporter adjusted her microphone and smiled nervously. "Thank you for sitting with us, Mr. Clark. Or, should I say, former CEO Clark?" Theo chuckled. "Theo's just fine. The suits are gone. You can keep the title." The camera rolled, red light blinking. "So, billions on the table, board seats, influence. Why give it all up?" Theo glanced down at Quentin, who had fallen asleep against his chest. His voice softened. "Because what I was building wasn't mine. It looked like success. It felt like power. But it was empty." The reporter leaned in. "And now?" "Now," Theo said, wrapping his arms more tightly around his son. "I'm building legacy. Not with skyscrapers or buyouts, but with breakfast runs, lemon-scented hand towels, bike rides in the park." The reporter smiled. "Do you miss the adrenaline?" Theo shrugged. "I traded adrenaline for peace." A moment passed. Then she asked, "Do you think other powerful men will follow your lead?" "I don't care if they do," Theo said simply. "I care that my son sees me show up, that my wife never questions if she's second to a boardroom, that our daughter knows her father fought for her before she ever took her first breath." The reporter paused, clearly moved. "Final question. If you could go back and tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?" Theo smiled. "Don't chase the world. Chase the people who make it worth living in." The reporter nodded, eyes glistening. "Thank you, Theo." He glanced toward the cafe window where Amira stood watching, hand still gently resting on her belly. He waved at her. She blew him a kiss. And in that quiet gesture the interview ended, not with noise, not with headlines, but with the kind of truth only love could explain. Later that afternoon, Theo sat on the front steps of Amira's place, sleeves rolled up, dress shoes traded for old sneakers. His tie hung loose around his neck, not for fashion, just habit. A local teen with a cracked phone held it up to record him casually, inspired by the earlier news segment. "Mr. Clark," the teen asked, "what's it like walking away from the most powerful seat in tech?" Theo looked up from tying Quentin's shoelace. "Well," he began, brushing dust from his hands, "I used to wake up to meetings, stock alerts, and 12 hours of pretending everything was under control. And now I wake up to the smell of fresh lemon zest and the sound of my son asking why eggs are shaped weird." The teen laughed. Theo smiled. "I stepped away from the boardroom, yeah, but I stepped into something real. I stepped into life." He looked over his shoulder at the open cafe door. The air inside carried warmth, laughter, and the faint clatter of dishes. "No more quarterly goals," Theo continued. "Just goals like teaching Quentin to read every sign on the block before summer ends, or surprising my wife with a new porch swing. But don't you miss it?" The teen pressed. "The power, the title." Theo leaned back and looked at the sky. "I used to chase status like it could fill something inside me. But it never did. Turns out, all I needed was a woman who believed in herself even when no one else did, and a kid who thinks I'm cooler than Spider-Man." The teen lowered the phone, grinning. "You gonna post that?" Theo asked. "Yeah," the teen said, "but I think it's gonna make people cry." Theo chuckled. "Let him." He stood, gave Quentin a high five, and walked back inside, into the only world he never wanted to leave again. They say home is where the heart is, but that's not always true. Sometimes the heart wanders, gets broken, lost, buried beneath jobs, expectations, or silence that stretches for years. But love, real love, doesn't stay buried. It waits. It waits behind lemonade stands on hot afternoons. It waits in old cafes filled with second chances and new recipes. It waits in the small hands of a child who didn't ask for the weight of legacy but carries it anyway, with laughter and bike scrapes and endless wonder. Theo didn't find home in blueprints or bank statements. He built it, with each hour he spent beside Amira, not trying to fix her, not trying to win, but just being. With every bedtime story read to Quentin, every dance in the kitchen, every late-night whisper on the couch about baby names and which room to paint next, with every sacrifice that said, "I choose this. I choose us." And Amira? She didn't wait for a savior. She never needed one. She built her own world, brick by brick, grit in her hands, pride in her spine. A cafe that wasn't just a business, but a place for people to feel human again. When she welcomed Theo back in, it wasn't out of weakness, it was strength. Forgiveness isn't a door you leave open for anyone. It's one you open with both hands when the right one finally knocks. Their love wasn't some fairy tale. It was fire and lemon peel, hard-earned, messy, real. So if you're looking for home, don't search for it in someone else's life. Build it, one truth at a time, one moment at a time, one breath, one laugh, one warm, defiant choice to love again. Because love isn't something you find, it's something you grow. If this story touched your heart even just a little, if it reminded you that sometimes the past doesn't stay gone forever, if it made you believe that second chances can taste like sugar, citrus, and slow kisses under lemon trees, then do something powerful right now. Drop a heart in the comments. Let us know if you still believe in love that returns after being lost. Hit that like button. It tells the algorithm this story matters. Share it with someone who needs to believe again, in healing, in hope, in the kind of love that waits patiently. And if you haven't already, subscribe. There are more stories like this one coming, raw, romantic, full of heart, and always with a lesson tucked inside. Because here at Mr. Peterson Long Stories, we don't just tell stories, we serve love, daily.